Salemi is a career expert for Monster and nationally syndicated columnist writing Vicki on Careers for Tribune. She's an author, keynote speaker, and previously worked in corporate HR and recruiting for 15 years. Find her at Vicki Salemi on Instagram and X, which I will put a link to in the show notes. Welcome, Vicki.
Hi, Maggie. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. I mean, you and I met way back in the SiriusXM days, and we're able to keep in touch since then. And it's so good to follow your career and get to share your advice with everyone today. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So recently, Vicki, you wrote an article in the New York Post. It titled Six Ways to Home In and Land That Elusive Job. And I was honored to contribute, so thanks for that. But recently, some companies have made the headlines themselves for changing their hiring standards to focus less on experience and job competence. So I'm so curious in terms of what you're seeing and what factors companies are considering in their hiring practices these days.
Yeah, it's so interesting, Maggie, because they're definitely more flexible. Like when I worked in corporate recruiting, it was this is the job, these are the skills, these are experiences, like done. They don't have it, move on. But they're much more flexible because there is a labor shortage and there's a skill shortage. So they're also
Labor
looking,
shortage and skills shortage. That's good for people to hear because they're pretty nervous out there, some folks.
yes. And so it's, I don't want to say easier, but it can be more, can be better right now, more beneficial to the job seeker now than let's say before the pandemic to use their transferable skills. So employers are being more flexible in terms of more lenient, I should say, in what they're looking for. And that goes for education as well. So it may not necessarily be that 4-year degree, like a bachelor's degree, not from undergrad, it might be certifications or other online training, internships, work experiences, and things like that.
That's good for career changers, especially. Yeah, that's good to know. It's interesting too, because another hot topic that people are focused on, not only having that job, but AI, of course, in the career space is something everyone's talking about. And recently I saw a blog post on Monster Hiring that you wrote that talked about it being time for employers. I really like this to focus on upskilling of their employees. And basically, I'd love to know how you suggest that companies help their existing employees gain the technical know-how required for this new AI, powered area we're in.
Yeah, it's an exciting time because AI is not going away. It's here to stay. And for companies as well as employees to embrace it. We know at Monster in our Work Watch report that dropped in January, about 4 out of 10 employers said they offer training and resources to workers for training and development. So back to your question, Maggie, is having hopefully more companies on board to roll out training, but then also encourage their employees and for the employees then to be proactive
Hmm.
and pursue it. Because it's one thing to have it available, but if they're not tapping into it to upskill themselves, it's really important, especially as employers are facing this shortage in terms of finding candidates who are viable for the job. Look at their own internal resources who are able and willing and probably would want to. I think the question becomes a little bit area of gray when employees are concerned that AA may feel like they're outsourcing their own job. So we had another survey that dropped, or poll that said some workers said that if they showed their boss some efficiencies due to AI to increase efficiencies on their job, their boss would pat them on the back and say, great job. Other people said, well, you know what? I'm afraid I'm going to get rid of my job by increasing
Right.
efficiencies. So the jury's still out. So I think there may be some reluctance, but in reality, AI can certainly help people with, let's say, offload some of the mundane tasks so they can be more creative and have more deep thinking sessions with their actual work. So I think there's definitely opportunity for employers to provide valuable training and then for the employees to tap into it.
Yeah, I've been trying it out myself, right? For marketing blurbs. It's great at
Yep.
rewriting your stuff. The other option too, I helped it to embellish on a vision, right? For the ideal day in the life that one of my clients had. I said, well, let's see if we can put this in and how far AI could take this to make it more real, make it more detailed. And it was actually very helpful. So I think it depends on what you're trying to use it for. But I agree with you. I think it's good to get familiar with it so at least you can start to understand how could I incorporate this into my work? How could it affect my job? If people are really that afraid that it's going to take their job away, you're probably better off learning that now, right?
Exactly. And then learn the other skills, get ahead of the curve, skate to where the puck is going, not where it's been or where it's currently at. So you want to think about, to your point, how can this help my job if it's going to get rid of my job? What's my next job? Like, seriously, like, what's the next step? What are the next 3 steps for me? And assume that AI will be part of that next job as well.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I love the hockey analogy.
I'm a baseball fan, so here we
Oh, there
go.
you go. Right. That always helps too. There's lots of good sports analogies for careers. So you did mention the work watch report, right? Put out by Monster. I did find that as well, put out for 2024. And some interesting statistics, lots of them. I mean, it's actually very robust, as you know. But it said 81% of workers said their current wage has not kept up with the rising cost of living. So that's 81%. And 59% of employers said they plan to offer increased salary and wages to remain competitive in hiring. That's interesting though, right? Because it's in hiring. So does that mean that people have to change jobs to get that salary bump, or is there a different way to maximize earning potential? What do you think? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's such a great stat. Meaning there's so much we could talk about in
Yes, right. It really makes you think.
yeah, yeah. And the number one way for people to boost their salary is to get a new job and to do it consistently, like to work at a company for a little bit. I don't want to say I'm not advocating job hopping every 6 months, but the stigma has decreased. They're really the red flags that I used to see when I was in recruiting are really much more diminished now than they were years ago. So it's important for job seekers or even current employees to say one of the best ways to boost their salary is to leave. But there may be other obligations. They may really like their boss, like their job, and say, well, where does this leave me? Talk to your boss about a promotion. Maybe there are ad hoc bonuses you can get throughout the year. Maybe you can negotiate more time off or decreased hours if they aren't able to increase your pay. Think about things out of the box that could be priorities for you and where you are in your life right now, but ultimately keep your eye on the prize and always know your worth. So this way you can go to your boss and say, this is what the market says, talk to your former boss, former colleagues, professional organizations, put together, gather information from a variety of sources, and then take the average or, leverage their insight based on your work skills, your work experiences and your skills, where that puts you in terms of salary, and then talk to your boss. And then say, I have all these accomplishments here, point them out. And this is what the market will bear. What are we doing about that? Not to make them defensive, but have an open dialogue with them and see what they say. And their reaction to you can speak volumes. Like watch their body language, see how maybe they are on board with you and say, you know what, you are underpaid. You are worth this amount. We know if you leave, it'll cost us X amount of dollars to replace you anyway. So there are a lot of factors in play. Your boss may go to bat for you, but then not be able to come up with the money that you need. So that conversation with your boss is very telling. And I always advise job seekers to do it anyway, because number one, it gets you in the habit of knowing your worth and articulating it. But two, you're ready then to look for a new job. You already know what your worth is. You've already had that conversation, and it gives you more options.
Yeah, it gives you that confidence too, right? This is all good exercise in being assertive, right?
Absolutely.
Standing up for yourself or speaking up for yourself. Yeah, and you're really right. I did have a client who I started working with while she was happy in her job and did want to get a bigger salary. So we did work on that. She did her research, she had her conversation, and then she ended up getting a new job opportunity that she was going after. They kind of found her and she was prepared. So you're absolutely right. That is really smart to always know your worth. Very good. So it's always fun, as we can tell here. You can see us both smiling, right? We love these conversations, like career geeks, right? But it's so fun to hear from a colleague in this career space and to understand trends and opportunities and from your perspective. So there was another article that I found, Biz Journals, where you were quoted, and you were saying that companies should focus on building strong retention plans and fostering a culture where employees can bring up issues without fear of retribution. That sounds really important. So tell us more about that.
So I just want to start off by saying in the fall, Monster, our poll data showed that the majority of employees said the number one, the scariest department for them to approach at work is HR. So that says a lot about fears in the workplace, because usually when you have an issue, who's the first person you go to? Someone in HR. So when we talk about retention, and just want to begin with the end in mind, ultimately the beautiful, like magical secret sauce to having an ecosystem where you have retention, you have employees who are happy, they're engaged, they're satisfied, you're an awesome coach, Maggie, but they don't need coaching because
right.
they're paid well, and they're like living their passion and their purpose. And it's just like this beautiful thing. And they don't want to leave. And they're paid really well. They get benefits, really excellent work benefits. And then that goes external. They don't leave. So there's retention. And then if there is a job opening, for recruiting, they don't, recruiters can, it's easier to market a company where people want to work and they're knocking on your door rather than you say, we don't have any applicants here. So
Mm,
circling back to the retention. So retention is really important. And then getting back into having this culture where people feel safe
mhm.
is so important. They feel safe to speak up in terms of they have ideas and they're not going to be judged. And they're actually positively reinforced for having these ideas and encouraged to speak up. They're recognized, they're seen, they're valued. And it doesn't take companies a lot of money to do this or a big cultural change overnight. It could just be like a boss saying, "Thank you. This is a great idea." And acknowledging them in front of a group as well as individually. So I think it's really important in terms of hopefully reducing any fear of retribution. And then it goes to other levels as well. That's one aspect. But then it could be if you see, let's say your boss is saying something unethical or something happened, someone is stealing from the company and you want to turn to someone, but what if that's your boss that's doing it, or you want to go to
Mm.
HR? So it's important, I think, for companies to improve upon this area and really think about how can we improve? How can we, number one, create this culture that starts, like I said, from something very simple, saying thank you, but also internally, maybe training the managers, doing some internal cultural, an internal audit, doing an upward feedback survey from employees. What would help you most? How do you feel safe? More, I would think psychologically than physically safe, but also maybe there's a hotline that needs to happen. Maybe there's a third party that needs to get involved. If it's a startup, it can be more challenging. If it's a toxic work environment, you know where to go. And then again, for the job seeker, their only route, their only exit at that point, their only strategy at that point may be the exit door to look for a new job, but hopefully it doesn't come to that. And companies, I think, if they focus again on that ecosystem that I mentioned a minute ago, to have this great, robust culture that people want to work, number one, because it's the right thing to do, first and foremost, then they won't have to think about any retribution. And they may
Right.
also lead from, bosses saying, I made a mistake, but hey, this is what happened. I'm owning it and we are moving on from this. So people know it's okay to fail and it's okay to make a mistake, admit it, own it, and learn from it, and then move on.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I think it's a big area that it's almost like untapped opportunity for companies to provide for this. And when I was at Martha Stewart in my own HR role, I was in training and development, so it wasn't on the other side of HR, but in fact, I think it helped because I became a safe, trusted place where employees could come and bring issues and they could trust that I would deal with it appropriately so that they wouldn't get in trouble, quote unquote, or have backlash. But at the same time, you have to know those issues if you're going to be effective in HR. So it behooves the company to really understand what's going on. So that's some really good points, and it does tie into retention because if employees don't feel they have a voice, and they have other options, they'll leave. They'll vote
Oh
with their
yeah.
feet, right? They'll move
Yeah.
on.
But kudos to you for creating a safe environment and a safe experience for them. So they knew when they came to you, they could come to you again.
Right,
And they knew it would also be confidential and you're
right.
professional and approachable and you listen. And that's key. Like being a great listener and having empathy is key for these employees. And then it helps the employer because if their retention is boosted, then hopefully they're more happy at work, they're more productive, they're satisfied, and then they don't have to recruit someone off the street who then they need to hire, assimilate to find the right fit, et cetera, the culture, everything.
Yeah, it does take a lot of time, energy, and resource. For sure. Well, Vicki, this has been so insightful. Are there other things, just one last question, if there's anything else you're working on that can give us kind of a preview into the rest of 2024?
Yeah, well, I think it's an exciting year in terms of we talked about upscaling, we talked about AI, and in our work watch report in January, the 95% of 95% of respondents said they're looking for a new job this year. So I think that's
95%.
yes, yes. And this to me is on par with like the great resignation that we saw a couple years ago. So it's interesting to see underneath that what's driving it, which is salary, burnout, let people want flexibility. They're telling us at Monster time and time again in terms of where and when they work. And in the UK, something that's interesting is recently, you probably heard about it, the 4-day work week trial that was so successful that the majority of employers, after the trial ended, they said, you know what, we're going to continue. So I think that's really interesting. A lot of exciting spaces to watch this year.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, I'm hearing from employees, all those things sound really good.
Yes,
So we're on
yes,
the right track. Well, Vicki Salemi, thank you so much for being here, sharing your insights, and I look forward to staying in touch.
same here. Thanks.